And long story short, they thumped the board of directors, and the board terminated the chairman and terminated the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
And as that was happening, there was a guy who was the president, and then I was the chief operating officer. And I was like, oh my God, how is the board going to hire a CEO? Like, it's the Great Recession.
Yeah.
Who wants to come into a bank where we
got demolished?
We fired the top two people, and we had to figure out how we were going to restructure the bank. And he looked at me, he was like, it's you and me. And I was like, what?
Oh my gosh.
And, to your point, that's probably the hardest no, because I believed in the organization and I believed in the team.
What if every obstacle in your path was actually preparing you for something greater? Because the reality is, it does. In this episode, I get a chance to talk with Ezra Eckhardt, President and CEO of STCU, whose journey from being a West Point cadet to leading one of Washington's largest credit unions is a masterclass in willpower, leadership, and community impact. From facing the relentless challenges of military life to steering organizations through epic economic downturns, Ezra's story is proof that the adversity isn't a dead end. It's training for what's ahead. His experiences in the Army, corporate America, and now the financial world show how grit, adaptability, and investing in people can turn challenges into opportunities. Ezra Eckhart's story of leadership, service, and transformation will leave you inspired only on Navigating No.
Ezra, thank you so much for coming in today and being a part of this podcast. I know you're a Spokaneite yourself, 5th generation.
Yeah.
And I am originally from Spokane, but I moved away to the Seattle and to Tokyo for 30 plus years. And we actually met last year at your leadership summit, and I was a speaker, but I actually followed you, and we met and we hit it off. And it's been a long time running, but I've wanted you to be on this podcast because your story and your journey is so impactful to a lot of people, because not only because you're a CEO and a president of a major credit union, but at the same time, it's like you've gone through a lot of hardship and rejections through your life. And so thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today.
So you say I've gone through a lot of hardship and rejection. I guess I'm supposed to say thank you for that.
Yes, you are. Well, but you've overcome it, right? And you've used that as your tool to become who you are.
Right. No, I think everybody faces all different types of hurdles and obstacles, and for each of us, it's just how you work your way through that and what lessons do you learn, and if you're able to continue making small mistakes hopefully and apply them to the future and just get a little bit better every single day. So
is that something that you started learning in as a younger kid, or through like experience, or through mentors, or was this something that you kind of took through your military schooling, or like what is it that kind of told you that it was okay to take this as a learning experience?
I'm not sure, probably the first time I really connected that. But I can tell you at West Point, they are absolutely, the whole school is experts at punching you in the nose every single day and just seeing how many times you keep coming back. So I learned a ton about just finding the right way to improvise, adapt, and overcome, and to persevere through lots of different obstacles. So
you're coming from Spokane and you went to West Point.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a culture shock for you?
Yeah, that was a pretty massive culture shock. So I grew up here in Spokane, kind of right at the bottom of the Monroe Street Hill. There used to be a little elementary school there, Emerson, and now it's a park. And grew up in the same house, got my hair cut at Dan's Barbershop, went to Strick's Donuts and Dairy Queen at the bottom of the hill there. And
but did you ever go to the Milk Jug?
I went to the Milk Jug. Yep. My grandparents lived in 4108 North Wall. So Milk Jug was like halfway in between where I lived and where they lived. So, I grew up kind of walking up the hill to the Garland movie theater, and so
I love that.
Yeah, all the Spokane highlights on the north side.
That was your hunting ground, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because coming back to Spokane, a lot of the things aren't here anymore.
Mhm.
I remember Patsy Clark's was huge. The
Mhm.
Rid Path. What was the restaurant up on top? It was I want to say it was Ankeny's, but that's not what it was.
Ankeny's. No,
It was Ankeny's.
yeah.
Okay, Ankeny's.
Right.
And then even the Arctic Circle, for
Mhm.
example, even though that's a franchise, but it was like a lot of Spokane has changed. And I think that, but it's been for the greater good at the same time. It's like there's a lot of little pieces of history here, but at the same time, it's like it's still the second largest city in Washington State. And we are so happy to be back.
Yeah.
And we live in Liberty Lake, and that's I know where STCU is headquartered, but it's like it's the community and the family feel that I had when I was a kid. Did you feel that as well growing up? Did you feel like Spokane was this great community for you, or what was your feelings?
I kind of, I'd say had pretty typical kid life in Spokane, where you jumped on your bike and you rode pretty much anywhere you wanted to go, and you hung out outside until the street lights came on. And
yeah. But did you drink out of a water hose?
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%.
That's great.
Yeah, my mom would say, "Get out of the house," and she'd make a little snack lunch and leave it on the back porch, and the hose was on, and we'd have water fights and stuff out in the house. And one of the things that I think about Spokane is that the more things change, the more they sort of stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
And about 2 weeks ago, we're working on a couple different housing projects at STCU, and so I kind of drove through that same area.
Yeah.
And looking at the big project that is underway, mixed use, mixed income housing project right on Garland and Wall,
Mm-hmm.
that is designed to provide affordable, accessible housing to all sorts of different people in our
Mm-hmm.
community. And we're going to try to partner with the developer and look at another property on Monroe, right around Indiana. We STCU has a couple different properties out in the valley and over on North Monroe. And I think that when you look at Spokane, what makes the city special is that it's a small city, but wrapped in a big city skin. And, we have all sorts of things like the Best of Broadway that comes through. We've got a symphony,
100%.
We've got a river, we've got an amazing airport. Our airport draws people from Canada, Montana, all over Idaho, all over Eastern Washington. There's, I think, 22 direct connections out of the airport. There's something like, right around 4.5 million to 5 million passengers in and out of the airport every single year.
Well, and you're on the board of the Spokane International Airport, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that, we have all of the closeness and connection and accessibility of a small city, and then the ability to attract some of those big city things. And my hope is for our community that we can really just continue to build up the things that make Spokane great. And currently, there's some stuff that needs attention and some things that as a community we have to come together and fix. But I think Spokane is a long runway if we work together and look at our past. We've have Expo 74 and we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of that. We created a medical school out of a defunct train yard. I'm not sure where else that's happened in the country. We have the connection of really sort of 4 universities here through Eastern and WSU and Whitworth and GU. Yeah. Supported by an excellent community college system. So I think there's so many just incredible attributes of Spokane. But I was kind of like you. So I grew up here and I was like, I got to get out of Dodge. There's got to be something different. Yeah. And, I was figuring that I probably had to pay for college on my own, and I didn't really know anything about loans or anything like that. So I did a little bit of research, actually in a book, and then it was the mid '80s. So
love that.
I whipped out an encyclopedia and was reading about the United States Military Academy and got accepted in there in the summer of 1988 and went away to college. And honestly, at that point in time, I never thought I was coming back here. I thought I was going to be in the Army forever. And I was just like gone to go do something else.
So you were at this point where you're here and you're like, okay, my parents aren't going to pay for college.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do? What opportunities are there? What tools can I take advantage of?
Yeah.
And just like when I was at Ferris, the counselor could lean me in a direction, but I had to know to go talk to a counselor because it wasn't like open information. We didn't have Google back then to like, oh, this is how you get into this college, or this is how you get college paid for.
Right.
So was there somebody who said, maybe look into the military?
No, I did it all 100% on my own.
I love that.
So as a matter of fact, it's the only college I applied to. So I had this epiphany sort of between my sophomore and junior year that if anything was going to happen, I just had to I had to do it on my own, had to figure it out. And I played or ran track and cross country and
at Gonzaga Prep.
At Gonzaga Prep.
Okay.
And then, but my main thing was I was on the debate team.
Mm-hmm.
So I was super proficient with I called it the advanced hunt and peck method on a typewriter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my 2 fingers, I could go to town. And so, I had to whip out an application on the typewriter and send it all in. And I had good grades, but I didn't really know anything about the process.
Mm-hmm.
So, being not smart in the grand scheme of things.
A naive kid, yeah.
I just applied to one place and got in and was like, oh, so that was easy. And went away off to West Point and
which is a hard school to get into.
Hard school to stay in.
Okay.
So at that point in time, they said it was a $250,000 education. I'm going to say today they probably call it a $500,000 education, $500,000 of value. But we would say, $250,000 jammed up your butt, 1 nickel at a time. So, there was nothing that was easy or straightforward about it. We had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And as a plebe, you have to deliver people's newspapers and clean up their laundry. And, you have a whole bunch of chores to do in the morning. And
people being your superiors, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just had, I think you mentioned this earlier, but yeah, it was culture shock because, I came from, Spokane where, everything was pretty straightforward, and high school where, things came to me pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you're in a whole different system and
you're not the big fish in the small pond anymore.
Yeah. You're you might be like a krill in the ocean.
Okay.
Everything's going to eat you there off the bat. So you go to cadet basic training in the summer, and that lasts 7 weeks or so. And, there's probably 1,400 new cadets and maybe 300 upperclassmen. And then 300 is enough. They're taking it to you. You're getting hazed all day long every day and learning how to march and clean your room and put your equipment together. And, it's the equivalent of regular basic training. It's just run by cadets. And that's your orientation.
You had mentioned hard not to quit. What kept you from quitting?
It seemed like people quit who had no real expectation what they were getting into. And I had never been back to West Point for a visit or anything. And really none of my family members had been in the military, but I kind of knew.
You couldn't compare it to really anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you're joining the Army.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not meant to be easy.
Had you seen Officer and a Gentleman and you were like, okay, this could be what it was like?
No. I mean, think about all the other war movies in the 80s, Platoon, maybe more stuff like that, or Full Metal Jacket. But, the basic training part was basic training.
Mm-hmm.
So, keep your head down. Don't say anything stupid. As a matter of fact, don't open your mouth. When somebody's in your face yelling at them, just say, yes, sir, kind of roll with it. And I clearly remember this. On the first day, they handed everybody this little book that probably had 150 pages. And it was 3 inches by 4 inches, had 150 pages of information. They're like, you have to memorize everything in this book. And I remember thinking, well, they probably want you to be like generally proficient with, most of the information,
like the notes, the cliff note of this 150 page.
Like generally tell me what's in this. And
Sure.
they're like, no, I said, memorize every word in this book. And I'm like, what?
And you're a smart kid, but you didn't have photographic memory, I'm assuming.
Well, then the next day they were like, well, do you have the book memorized? And I'm like, well, I mean, no, I don't.
Was there punishment based off? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
You got hazed. It's like push-ups and stuff. And I'd say at that point, you're talking like the later 80s. It's kind of right at the transition between more like stiff upper lip and the verge of kinder, gentler.
Yeah.
It was there was still a lot of like not like physical abuse, but things that were...
You experienced it.
Yeah. Things today that would be not kosher.
Sure. 100%.
Yeah. So anyway, you kind of go through being a new cadet and go start, the 4-year journey. And, every single PE experience there is supervised torture. It's like combat swimming. You learn hand-to-hand combatives, you have some pugil stick stuff, you have wrestling, you have boxing, even like the gymnastics class is like combat gymnastics.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm saying combat,
yeah.
facetious, but they just, it's kind of like, how can we abuse these kids? And you probably
for them to have some kind of lesson or some kind of calisthenic involved in it.
Yeah. Gymnastics, most of the PE things were 1,000-point classes. And then however the points were divided up. In gymnastics, there was a 5-point scale. And then you got to figure that the culminating thing was this thing called the indoor obstacle course. That is pretty intense.
Mm-hmm.
And so we probably got graded on, I'm going to say there was probably, somewhere around, 150 different skills.
Sure.
Maybe 175 different skills that you got trained. And it was like somersaults, forward somersaults, backward somersaults, handstand, headstand, 5 vault exercises, 5 pommel exercises, 5 ring exercises. How fast can you climb a rope? How many different ways can you climb a rope?
I can see you're not bitter at this anymore. So
yeah.
It's like...
Well, I got A in gymnastics.
Okay. Oh, yes. All right.
But the funny thing about it was every one of those skills had a 5-point scale.
Mm-hmm.
And the joke was, if you got a 4 or 5, you're just like, oh my God, thank God, and move on to the next one. But they kept this record and you had to pass each one of them by a certain time period. And the joke was, you'd like, let's say headstand,
mm-hmm.
like there was a certain way that you had to like, position your body and your form had to be a certain way.
Sure.
And, even if you got all the way correctly up, you might get a low score. So the joke was that on some of these skills, you'd be trying and trying and trying, and the instructor would be like, high 0. Like you almost got 1 point on that thing, but it's still a 0. High 0.
But you were close, no matter if you did it or not.
Yeah, high 0.
Were you connecting with the other cadets at that time?
Yeah, it's split up. So when I was there was 36 companies. I think I'm not sure how many there are now, probably still 36, might be 32, split up into 4 regiments. And then each company has, about 30 cadets in each grade level. Mm-hmm. And so it's, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. They're called plebes, yearlings, cows, and firsties. Mm-hmm. So there's, about 100 to 120 cadets in each company. But when you came back from cadet basic training, I was like, hey, that was tough, but I think I can do this. And I remember coming back into the barracks and one of the drill instructors was like, now you guys are really in for it because, the new cadets had a 3-to-1 advantage over the drill instructors in the summer. And once you get back in the barracks, it flips around and there's 3 upperclassmen for every plebe.
Really?
And, Yeah. And there's, some of those guys are pretty bitter
Mm-hmm.
and, have it out for some of the plebes. But again, that's kind of, what you have to expect. And there's two very memorable things that stick out in my mind. The first one is I remember getting to my room, getting it all set up and thinking to myself, like, I think I can do this. Like, I made it through the summer. It was different than I thought, but I think I can do it.
This is your sophomore right now.
No, I'm freshman.
You're a freshman.
Just got through the summer. I'm like, I think I got this all set. I'm ready to go. And I totally remember thinking, as long as I don't have to do boxing my first semester, I'll be okay. And then that next morning, I got my transcript, first period, boxing. And so you have to wake up at 4:30 in the morning, get all ready, run around between 4, 5, and 6.
Were you a morning person prior to ever going there? Like, did you have a high school job that you were like, oh, I got to get up?
I would run a little bit in the morning. I would say I was kind of morning ambivalent. Waking up in the morning wasn't really a problem.
Okay.
But for the rest of my life, waking up in the morning has been pretty easy.
Okay. Well,
because
it set the tone for you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right off the bat. And so, you go to boxing, you start off the morning, do all your chores, go to formation, go in, even at breakfast, you're sort of getting hazed because you got to serve the upperclassmen, and there's a whole bunch of different things you're supposed to do at the table, how you pour the water, how you cut the cake, how the food gets divided. And the freshmen just don't have a lot of time to eat. So then you run out of there and you got to carry all your books around. Now they have backpacks. We had to actually carry all the stuff in our arms. And so you run over to boxing. The gymnasium is something like straight out of a World War II concentration camp. It's all bricks, stinks. The gloves have been washed, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Get the boxing gloves on. And I think I weighed like 150 pounds soaking wet. And so they divided all the kids up, and they're like, okay, 100 to 130 pounds over here, 131 to 149 over here, 150 to like 190 over here. And so you line up, and I just got literally smacked around by all these guys that are like, 185, 190. And I'm like, well, how are these lines drawn? Like, I'm getting the crap beat out of me every day.
Well, in judo, it had similar weights, right? And it was like, I was always on the low end of the biggest range. And I would always lose to the guy who outweighed me. Yeah. And a buddy of mine was 2 classes below me, but he was at the height of his, or the peak of his, and he would always come home with trophies. I was always getting this little rag doll. Yeah. So I had the bruises to show it.
Yeah. So you'd line up. A regular day of boxing was like, all right, we're going to teach you how to punch and take a punch. Everybody line up. Okay. For 30 seconds, punch each other in the stomach. Punch, 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 punch. Stop. Okay. Now for 30 seconds, punch each other in the face. Punch, 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 punch. And then it culminates with.
Did you have headgear or not?
Headgear,
okay.
Yeah. But, it only takes so many times to get punched in the nose, even when you have headgear.
Yeah, 100%.
So everybody gets bloody noses. And I think I got a D+, like a high 0.
I was just going to say, was it a high 0?
Yeah, I think I got a D+. It worked out okay because I think I graduated 20th in my class physically. So it all averaged out in the long run. But, like right off the bat, just literally getting punched in the nose. And my next class was a 2-period long calculus class. And I'd go into calculus, blood would be dripping down my face, trying to take a calculus test. And it's combat calculus. So you have to turn your homework in. It has to be put together with a ruler. You had to do math on the chalkboards.
And I thought biz calc was hard. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You'd have graded board calculus. So you'd have to do your homework on a chalkboard. and half of the grade was like how straight the lines were. So you're getting hazed by a captain in the Army in there. So like, that was the first thing. I was like, all right, if I can make it through calculus and boxing back to back, I'll be okay. And then probably about 3 months later, kind of towards the end of the first, semester, I got the snot beat out of me in boxing. I think I got an F on a calculus test. I think I got a D on an English paper, and it was pouring down rain. So they canceled the parade for that day. And I just walked back up to my room and I laid down on the bed and I'm like, I got to get my shit together. Like, what is going on here? Yeah. And, that's kind of West Point in a microcosm. Like every day you got to figure out how to just like get a little bit better and learn. Like they're like, nobody's going to have all great days there.
So it was almost like it was expected that you were getting those grades.
Yeah.
How you handled that failure. I ended up
graduating 9th in my class. So like, okay, you got an F on a calculus test.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
So the system of grading, I think, is probably still the same, where it's about 70% academics, 20% physical, and like 10% military. So however my scores added up, I think I ended up being about, I think I was 20th physically, 30th militarily, and 40th academically. I think average that all together with everybody else, I came out 9th in my class. And ironically, the senior year, I was the #1 cadet of my year group for that year.
Yeah.
So my grades were super high. I got awesome scores on all the PT tests. I got A's on all the military stuff.
You figured out what you were doing wrong and you started to apply it. Now I had mentioned connections within that. Like, did you find that you were talking to the other cadets and saying, are you feeling the same thing? Like, or did you keep your head down and it was just all about you?
Well, you definitely, everybody, you learn teamwork from the get-go.
Okay.
You cannot be effective there as an individual contributor. You have to work together. And that's really the point of the summer program, is they take, 40 doofuses straight off the street out of high school, and you have all of these team-based tasks and for your squad and your platoon. And that platoon of freshmen, plebes, go and gets assigned to a company. And my first company was F3. And then right on this transition point, for the 15 years before that, a company would stay together for 4 years. And in my year group, we stayed together for 2 years, and then we got scrambled and mixed up. So you had to kind of like make a whole new set of friends.
In the school or outside
in the school.
After you graduate?
Yeah,
okay.
In the school.
Okay.
Yeah. So think about it kind of like there's 36 fraternities, and then, halfway through they scrambled the fraternities up and, mixed them around, just because those groups, if you get 30 or 40 people that have kind of already, gone through some interesting stuff together, like, sometimes you can form amazing behaviors and sometimes there can be questionable behaviors. So like mix it up a little bit and then let the behaviors kind of restart to form.
And learn from each other, obviously. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a lot of peer communication. And, one of the things about it, like, you're competing against your peers, but you also have to work with them. And most of the upper class grading was graded on projects. So you had to work with your peers, 2 or 3 or 4 people on group projects. One of my project coping skills was to say, okay, people, I'll do the project. You write the cover page.
Yeah.
You
delegate
work
X,
on
Y,
the
and Z.
graphs.
Yeah.
I'll write the report. You make sure that it's all coordinated. You run it over to the box, but I don't want you guys like messing up my grade on this thing. So I'm going to be the project manager.
Okay.
That worked pretty well for me.
Okay.
And to be honest, it worked pretty well for all the people in my group too. So that's probably where I learned, some peer leadership and project management skills.
Well, I definitely wanted to hit on that because like, I want to know, do you feel like what prepped you to become a great leader at STCU? Like, is it a culmination of all those things? Is it a culmination of all of these mentors, all these people that like, what would you give the most credit to if you were to say that?
I would give the most credit to the journey. And I would say anybody who thinks they are a great leader is not practicing enough leadership every day, because the people in my mind that are the best leaders are the ones that are constantly trying to get better. And there's always lessons to learn. And that was my experience in college. And then I was in the Army for 6 years, and there's more leadership opportunities. And then I left the Army at the end of the Clinton administration in 1998, and the Army had shrunk by 50%, from the end of the Cold War to the late 90s, but the number of deployments had increased by 2x. So I got out in 98, before Iraq and Afghanistan. And
was that your choice? Like, you were just like, I have a different calling. What was it?
I had a pretty cool job right off the bat. I was an infantry officer, and I
thought you were going to be a boxing instructor.
Yeah. Yeah. Next best thing. Right. So I was an infantry officer, went to airborne school, went to Ranger school. I got assigned to a separate airborne battalion in Europe. So we were the forward reserve for the U.S. Army Europe, on basically the U.S. Army Europe's quick reaction force. At that point in time, the only airborne battalion stationed outside of the United States. So we went to Bosnia and Liberia and Rwanda, but it was before the bigger wars have started. That unit is now a separate combat brigade, the 173rd Airborne Brigade. And when I was there, it was just one battalion. And so I had an amazing experience as a lieutenant. We were every quarter we were training in Germany for 6 weeks. We were I was on the first plane load of Americans into Bosnia, but nobody was really shooting at us.
Sure.
And so when I went back to Fort Benning to go to the officer advanced course, it was like, I just kind of had one of the coolest jobs you can have. I'm not really sure, given the direction of the reduction in the Army, if this is going to be my thing forever.
What direction it could go, right? Yeah.
And so I looked around and, should I go to business school? And I did. I thought, that applying to business school is probably going to be just like applying to West Point. Oh, I'll just apply to Harvard and I'll get in and it won't be a problem.
Sure.
But I applied to maybe, Harvard and Wharton and Stanford and Duke and Chicago, and I got waitlisted at Harvard. And but one of the best things that happened to me was not going to business school. I think if I had gone to one of the big name business schools, which a lot of people did, I think it would have changed my life in a completely different direction. I'd be living in New York. I'd be working at a hedge fund or something, or in one of the private equity firms, and it's just a different life than I have had, and I don't regret that at all.
I think that's important for people to hear, is that it's like sometimes like it can be a blessing in disguise. And then if you don't look at it resentfully, or if you don't look at it like, oh, I regret this, it is a totally different mindset, because you can go left or right. And it's like, it might be a great life here, but it can also be a great life here. I want to track back really quick, because my grandfather was a paratrooper, and I have to know, did you want to jump out of a plane?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you did?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you were super excited the first time you ever did it.
Right.
Oh my God. I love that is not on my high list.
It's pretty fun, actually.
Is it?
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Okay.
It is, the worst part about the whole thing is not jumping out of the airplane. It's hitting the ground. That is sometimes not very pleasant.
Well, and because military parachuting is way different than civilian style, right? It's a softer landing. And I know my grandfather had knee replacements and hip replacements, and it was just like, and I don't remember his story, but it was like he jumped for $1 extra a weekend, you know, like that every jump was $1 extra for the family.
So the airborne pay, I think was $150 a month, and I think it's still $150 a month 35 years later.
$149.
Yeah.
Oh
so
my gosh.
like that part hasn't increased, you know, at least since the mid 80s.
You felt the landing several times?
Well, yeah, if you land on concrete or asphalt or you hit a tree,
do you ever have nightmares? That. Like you're like going to bed and you feel like you're back at jumping out of a plane?
I don't know if I actually like think about that so much. But jumping out of a plane is a little bit different than jumping out of a helicopter. When you jump out of an airplane, it's pretty violent, chaotic, because the prop blast of the airplane. So you fall 250 feet down and 150 feet behind the airplane in 4 seconds, and then your parachute opens. But when you're falling, like you're getting completely whipsawed around in the wind. So you keep your body all tight together, and then you fall down, your parachute opens. And so it goes from being like loud and just like noisy and you're getting flipped all over the place to being super quiet, and the plane's gone. And then all of a sudden it's just quiet.
Oh, wow.
And you just like hear the wind kind of go through your parachute. And the parachutes have, again, gotten better. We had this thing called a T-10 Charlie, and now I think they use these square parachutes or the -1 Bravo, and they are better parachutes now. The parachute that I used was probably not fundamentally different than the one your grandfather used. And so you would kind of go, just fall pretty much straight down, and the wind might carry you around a little bit, and you could steer it a little bit by pulling on the risers, but not dramatically. And we jumped once into Germany out of a helicopter. When you jump out of a helicopter, you fall for 6 seconds, and the helicopters are moving slower. So you fall probably more like 300 feet and not substantially farther behind the helicopter. It's probably fall 300 feet and only 100 feet behind the helicopter. So you fall like straight down, and that extra 2 seconds, when you're used to falling for 4 seconds, and then you fall for 6 seconds, that's a long time. You're like, oh my God, like, is the parachute going to open? So the helicopters usually drop you a little bit higher. And, as long as your parachute opens, 300 or 400 feet above the ground, you're going to be fine. And then you kind of like float down, but you're still going at like 18 or 20 feet per second.
Yeah.
So when you hit the ground, it's kind of like going up on a 2-story roof and jumping off. And probably the most painful part of jumping out of an airplane is the preparation, because they have these things like a parachute landing fall, and they have these 4-foot tables. So when you go jump, you have to do 30 or 40 parachute landing falls. Let's see, 8 times, around 40. And so you're jumping off this table 40 times every time before you go and jump.
So just the repetition of the bam, 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 bam.
Yeah. And then, if you land on grass, as long as it's not super uneven, that's great. If you hit, a road or an airfield or a car or a tree,
like you said, you're right.
Yeah. Those are the things that kind of hurt.
Did a lot of guys roll their ankles?
Oh yeah. And people would tear off their biceps because you'd get them stuck in the static line, or people would hit the side of the airplane, or people could collide in the air. There's dozens of different ways to get injured when you jump out of an airplane.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Well, you did not sell me on it, by the way.
It is fun.
It is.
I want to just let you know it is fun.
Okay, it is fun. And maybe civilian might be a little better. Yeah. When you and one other thing I want to hit on is when you graduated and you deployed and you were a company leader, did you find that you had just graduated? How did you gain the trust of your company? Like, how did you gain the trust as this newbie?
Yeah, that's a challenge. So you graduate from college and then you go to school for a year. You go to the infantry officer basics course, you go to airborne school, you go to ranger school. So you go to school for a year, but then you show up at your unit and you're just like a private. There's staff sergeants and platoon sergeants, sergeants first class, first sergeants, guys that have been in the Army for 12, 15, 20 years. And you literally are brand new.
Yeah.
And that's why they call platoon leaders the butter bar. And so you have to forge a strong relationship with your platoon sergeant. Yeah, you outrank all the NCOs, but they do have more experience.
100%.
And I found it in an airborne unit, those NCOs are very courteous with the lieutenants, but they also have a way of appropriately sort of challenging you. So you can't come in and like think you're going to change the Army. People have been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
You're just the newest person to show up. So forging that relationship that is based on trust and communication. And, if you don't think you're like, they're getting a new one of you every year. And these guys have been working together for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I think you just have to focus on, again, communication and trust building. And then typically you're in a place for 3 years. So I was a platoon leader and then I became a company executive officer. I did that job for a long time. So you're the second in command of 135 airborne soldiers. That's when we went to Bosnia. I was a company executive officer. And that was a great experience. And then I was a battalion staff officer for a little bit, and then went back to Fort Benning as a captain and went to the advanced course and wrapped up my career as a company commander. So, not an airborne unit, but in a regular infantry rifle unit. And at that point, in my mind, I kind of did the most fun jobs that there are in the Army.
Right.
This is just my opinion. The worst jobs in the Army are as a major. The best jobs are as a lieutenant and a captain. The worst jobs are as a major. And then when you're a lieutenant colonel, you start to get back into some good jobs.
Gotcha.
So I was like,
that's a long process to get to.
Yeah. 10 years.
Sure.
You could be a major for 10 years.
Sure.
I'm like, it's probably a good time for me to go do something
myself
else.
That much.
Yeah. So I used when I didn't get into graduate school, and I was a little bit disappointed, but
this is one of the Ivies or something like that.
Yeah, but not really that disappointed. I was like, oh, well, I'll probably have another chance down the road. So I went and worked for Allied Signal. Allied Signal acquired Honeywell. I was on the integration team for the Honeywell group that was here in Spokane. So when I started, I worked in Seattle in the avionics group for about 2 years. I got involved in the leadership development program at Allied Signal. I went through pretty much 2 years straight of corporate leadership development.
Were you still growing? Like, were you like,
oh,
wow, yeah. I thought I knew a lot.
I didn't know anything about business.
Okay.
I didn't know anything about
leadership,
business.
You felt like you had something, but you
Army leadership is very different than business leadership.
Okay. All right.
Army leadership is, hey, we're all getting orders to go here and do this. And Army, Army management is, hey, we have this much money to spend on bullets, and the food shows up, and you load dudes in a truck or an airplane, and then you go someplace and you blow something up, right? Like that's the Army. or at least as an infantry guy.
Yeah.
And, but business leadership, like what's a business plan, and, what's a P&L and a balance sheet. And so, I went through the 2 years of Honeywell leadership. I went to individual leadership and small group leadership and project management. And I went through, the year-long class on continuous improvement. I went through another year-long class and got certified as a master black belt. I was, probably in the first 50 master black belts trained at Honeywell. I was in the 4th class. So maybe in the first 40 that were trained. I taught,
boxing.
Six Sigma. Yeah, sort of.
Okay.
Yeah. I taught Six Sigma, black belt classes for 3 years. And I was really good at that. I was great, company trainer. I had probably 65 project managers who worked for me. Then I became the factory manager for the Allied Signal Honeywell factory here in Spokane. And that's really what brought me here.
Brought you back.
Yeah.
You never expected to come back?
Expecting to move back to Spokane. And
I am on the same page with you. I did not think that I would come back. Did you get into martial arts at all? Because you just mentioned black belt, but this is a different series. But martial arts never got into it.
I got into adventure races, mountaineering. I was in the Seattle Mountaineers, lot of mountain climbing, trail hikes, outdoor stuff.
And you still continue that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love doing all that stuff.
So when you came back, did you feel, what was keeping you from coming back? What was that one thing that was keeping you from coming back?
it never really crossed my mind what types of businesses were in Spokane or what the opportunity really was. And when Allied Signal acquired Honeywell, I was just kind of looking at the list of jobs on the company internal job page. And I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this one is in Spokane. I didn't even know there was a thing in Spokane. And, kind of worked the system and got hired here. And I probably moved. The reason I left Honeywell is that in the 6 years I was there, I physically moved more times than I did in the 6 years I was in the Army.
I was going to ask that in the military. Okay.
Yeah. So I moved from Seattle to Spokane to California, back to Spokane, back to California.
Got
and
shuffled.
I was like, I got out of the Army so I wouldn't have to move around so much.
Sure.
And but I had all of these benefits from being at Honeywell, 2 more years of leader development, the business certifications. Honeywell paid for my MBA at GU. So way better than me going to Harvard and paying for it by myself.
Sure.
I got it paid for here.
Yeah.
And
would you suggest that, like, for kids trying to find, or kids or adults trying to find a company that will lift you up?
Right. And that's one of the huge advantages that we have at STCU. We have an amazing tuition reimbursement program. It's based on your tenure in the organization, but, we'll pay for people's undergrads, we'll pay for AAs, we'll pay for people's master's degrees.
That's awesome.
We have an amazing program that really helps people continue their lifelong learning. So, and
that only benefits you and the community as well, because you're bringing everybody up at the same time.
Yeah. I would highly encourage people to just keep their journey around learning. So, of the 6 years I was at Honeywell, I probably spent 4 years of that either working on my MBA or connected one way or another to some type of a training curriculum, either delivering training or in training through the continuous improvement groups. So that was very helpful for me. So Absolutely. I went from, coming out of the Army, knowing how to dig holes and, blow things up.
Land into trees.
Yeah. I could read a compass, jump out of an airplane.
Do you like our compass?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
All right. So you can read the topography on this. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I just don't know what the contour lines are. Are they 100 feet? Are they 20 meters?
Good point.
Yeah.
I wouldn't jump out of my ad on that one.
Yeah.
By
I
any means.
wouldn't want to jump on anything there. It looks like there's a lot of contour lines. I like it when there's like no contour lines. Then it means it's flat. So,
and grassy with no holes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But at this point, so you're at Honeywell and it's acquired. Is there any dream of getting into the financial service district?
Not at
profession?
all.
Okay.
I thought I was going to become the general manager of that group in Honeywell. And I think if I had stayed there, I would definitely have become a general manager. A couple of my peers moved down that path. But at that point, I was like, well, I'm in Spokane and, I like Washington. I want to stay around here. And I had really wanted to get a job offer at Microsoft when I was first getting out of the Army. And a recruiter called me up and said, hey, we have this job doing pretty much what you already were trained to do as a continuous improvement master black belt at Microsoft. And so I took that job and I worked there for about little bit over a year. And it was great. I was at Microsoft kind of, right at the post Y2K. The campus was really expanding. I became the program manager in the department, the finance department, working on the Microsoft Consulting Services budget. And I totally remember sitting in my office one day looking at this P&L for the Microsoft Consulting Services business group and thinking the P&L and the balance sheet are just the same as the business group that I had at Honeywell, except my business group was in millions and these are in billions.
Wow.
And there's like 1,000 order of magnitude bigger. And just kind of
did that scare you, or
it didn't scare me? It just kind of blew me away there for a second. Here we're like planning the budget. Yeah. It's just in billions.
Yeah. Just a couple more zeros on there. Wow.
And, I had this conversation, my kids were young and, I had this conversation with my wife.
And you're living in Seattle?
Nope. I was commuting from Spokane.
Oh, wow.
Yep. I was commuting from Spokane. And, at that point, little did I know, there's probably been 5 or 6 times where I commuted to just make everything easier for my family. I commuted twice when I was at Honeywell for 6 or 9 months in each case. I commuted that time for a year to Seattle. And so I was kind of on this Spokane boomerang. And after a year, I was like, we either have to move here because there's a ton of opportunity or I need to get a job in Spokane. So I started looking around in Spokane and there was in the newspaper, I'm not suggesting that this is the best way to get a job, but in the newspaper, there was 2 job openings at Sterling Savings Bank. And one was, they called it the senior technology leader. I think it was corporate. It had this made up job title, senior corporate technology services manager. And then one was the senior corporate administrative services manager. I'm like, I don't even know what either one of those things are. So I applied for both of them and then had some referrals to kind of get my foot in the door and went in and met with the person, Heidi Stanley, that was the vice chair of the company. And she was like, well, which of these 2 jobs do you think you're more qualified for? And I was like, well, I mean,
what one pays more?
Yeah, they were sort of contemporary. And I'm like, I think the administrative services thing, it's HR and marketing. I could do marketing. I mean, how hard could marketing be? And HR and marketing and facilities. I'm like, well, I ran a 1 million square foot facility through Honeywell and I had a lot of HR stuff to deal with. I think I could do that. And she was like, well, I think we need you for the corporate services job because that's IT and deposit operations. And I'm like, I don't know anything about IT. And she said, well, you work in Microsoft. And I'm like, I'm in the finance department.
That's the association. I love that.
Yeah. I'm like,
Okay.
I'm in the finance department at Microsoft. But that's the job that I took. And so I spent the first year
learning how
about
to do it.
Banking IT, which is, totally different. Bank systems are very archaic. I went around to the branches. I learned how, what the tellers did.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of time like figuring out just how the systems were connected to each other.
Did you do this on your own, or was somebody kind of helping you along the way? Or you're like, I need to figure this out, and this is how I do what I need to do? I
did it on my own.
Okay.
Yeah. There was plenty of people to help me figure it out, but I did it on my own. There wasn't like a plan. It was me saying, like, if I'm going to be successful at this job, then I need to figure out how these pieces work together. And that sort of started this totally different journey. So, up to that point, my training through the Army and Honeywell really was around team leadership and project management.
Mm-hmm.
And then I transitioned that project management towards business unit management and financial management at Sterling. And at Sterling, pretty much every year for the first 5 years I was there, I added in or picked up some other chunk of responsibility. So eventually those two teams, the technical services and administrative services, came together under me. And I became the chief administrative officer. And then we added in the lending support groups. I became the chief operating officer. So over the course of that time period from 2005 to 2009, I ended up as the chief operating officer, sort of running all of the back end of the bank. So,
your repertoire is growing and growing and growing. You're not your resume, but more like your skill set, and everything is like you're becoming more marketable.
Yeah, all the operational things.
Okay.
So, I had, if you think about how a bank works, there's bankers, there's branches, and then there's all the support teams.
Mm-hmm.
So, I didn't have the commercial bankers. I didn't have the mortgage teams. I didn't have the branches or the private bankers, but any of the groups that supported them reported to me. And like a lot of different companies, the Great Recession kicked off, and we got hit with a pretty substantial ding by the regulators, and they did not like how the company business model was set up. And long story short, they thumped the board of directors, and the board terminated the chairman and terminated the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
And as that was happening, there was a guy who was the president, and then I was the chief operating officer. And I totally remember sitting in his office, and I was like, oh my God, how is the board going to hire a CEO? Like, it's the Great Recession.
Yeah.
Like, how are we going to, who wants to come into a bank where we
got demolished?
We fired the top two people, and we had to figure out how we were going to, restructure the bank. And he looked at me, he was like, it's you and me. And I was like, what?
Oh my gosh.
And, to your point, that's probably the hardest no, because I believed in the organization, and I believed in the team. And I was not expecting, that through 2008 into 2009, that, we were going to be put in a predicament like that. But, similar to just other experiences, and with the involvement and connection of a lot of smart, hardworking people, we restructured the business plan, and the guy who was the president became the CEO. His name is Greg Sibley. And I went from being the chief operating officer to being the president. And, Greg and I went back to New York and San Francisco and LA and Boston, and a couple side trips to Charlotte, North Carolina, and a few other places. And we talked to probably 220 hedge funds and private equity funds. And over the course of that year, from October of 2009 until August of 2010, we basically had to go revamp and then resell Sterling
right,
to the marketplace. And we raised $730 million and recapped the bank. And we were able to run that model for 5 years. And we had an exit in 2000. And the sale of the bank was completed in the fall of 2013 to Umpqua. And our shareholders made about 4 times their money on that. So I think it really shows, like from a financial point of view,
Sure.
what can happen when a team really works together. Umpqua subsequently had a merger of equals into Columbia. So if you think about the Pacific Northwest, you had all of these banks that were going down similar journeys. And if you look at the combination of Sterling and Umpqua and Columbia together, that represents what today is a $50 billion bank. That really is the combination of probably, I'd say, at least 50 other financial institutions.
Really?
Sterling had probably in its life, 20 mergers, and Columbia and Umpqua have at least 15 each. Mm-hmm. So it's at least 50 banks that are consolidated together in the combination of that one now $50 billion company.
That's incredible. I mean, that's a journey, and it's like you're hit with that no, and then what do you do with it? And I love that you're like, we're sitting in this room and you didn't expect it, but it's up to you too. Mm-hmm. And what you did with that information and how you ran with it is remarkable. But when you were doing that, were you afraid that you were going to let people down? Like, were you afraid of?
Right.
Okay.
I remember one morning, we were literally like begging for money. and there's a lot of prep phone calls, and there was a lot of trips, and this is now 15 years ago. So we had like the first generation iPad, and I remember thinking like,
I still have mine.
Yeah. I'm like, well, the software can't be updated.
Right. That's true. That's true.
So I had this first generation iPad, and the very first day that we were in New York was like having a season of The Apprentice crammed into like 8 hours, 10 hours. We showed up, we thought, like, in my mind, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Our thing is so amazing that people are just going to line up and
give you money,
and they're going to give us money. Mm-hmm. And we hired this investment bank to represent us, Sandler O'Neill. And we showed up and we went into their securities, and the bank had a long-standing relationship with these guys. And we went into their securities trading desk, and we met with, 3 of the main principals, and they took our presentation that we'd been working on for like 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. We the numbers were like finely crafted, and, it was all bound and everything was all done. And the guy basically like ripped it apart and barfed on it for 30 minutes. Brutal. He was like, this sucks and this sucks and this needs to go here and this needs to be rearranged and you got to say this and don't say that. And he goes, and by the way, we need you guys to do a rehearsal in 3 hours. And then we've got a meeting scheduled about 90 minutes after that.
But I think that goes to every industry too. Like if you're writing a business plan or you're writing a book, mm-hmm. and it's like you think your book is going to be great, and then it comes back with more red than black and white. Or it's like your business plan is like, I understand what I want to do, but if the buyer or the investor or the venture capitalist doesn't understand, then it's garbage. Yeah. And then what you do with that rejection. So you're practicing, you're prepping the 3 hour prep to sell the banking system.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So he ripped it all apart, and there was really just me and two other people there, the CEO and this woman who was our chief credit officer. And we went into like SWAT mode. And thank God I didn't only have the iPad, because I had this epiphany of like, oh my God, the only thing you can do on an iPad is read stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You can't fix stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, at that point in time, it wasn't a working tool.
Mm-hmm.
So I had whipped out my PC and I started like rejockeying all these slides. Thank God I became a PowerPoint wizard at Honeywell and Microsoft.
Black belt.
So we're like, changing it all up. And I called the CFO and I'm like, I need this and this and this. He's like, well, I can't possibly get that to you in an hour. I go, listen, dude, if you don't give it to me, I'm just going to make it up. Click. And I certainly had to
validate certain things, right?
But I had for sure in that first pack, because I was knee deep in all the numbers for years. And the CFO and I did all the budget stuff. So, I wasn't $50 million off on a thing. It just was, I might've been a couple nickels off.
Yeah.
And so we revamped that whole thing. We went in and did the rehearsal on napkins, and they were printing up the booklets, and we left and the booklets weren't even ready. And we jumped in a taxi and we drove to the very first meeting, 450 Lexington. We went up to whatever the 25th floor or something, Warburg Pincus, and we gave our pitch. We walked in, said, hello, hello, hello. The books came in the elevator behind us. They didn't even we didn't have the books when we left.
Sure.
We walked in, we gave them the books, we went through the presentation, and they were like, oh, this isn't what we were expecting. We were expecting things to be a lot worse. And long story short, Warburg Pincus was the lead investor in the recap of Sterling. So that very first group of people that we talked to believed at the time. It took a long time for me to understand that they believed, but they believed in what we were putting together. And they only invested in the US, I think, in 4 or 5 banks, and they picked Sterling, and they invested $173 million. And then they made 4 times that amount, in 3.5 years when they sold their portion.
But that was because you were able to adapt and pivot at that moment and do what was required to get the job done.
Yeah.
And do you feel like that was a long time coming? Like your military background helped you with that? Or was that just this drive that you had since you were obviously a kid?
Yeah, I think it was the culmination of all of those pieces. And what you had asked me earlier, I didn't really think we were going to fail, because I believed in the team and I believed in what we were doing. There's certainly some points in time where I'm like, God, if this doesn't work, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And I was pretty sure I wasn't going to go to jail. But some of the banks that failed
100%.
had, people that were, because I think I wasn't going to be held responsible by the regulators like that. But I did find out that everybody at a bank has a file with the regulators. Oh, that's
awesome.
And, I did, and I still do today, I think, have a very good relationship with the FDIC and the NCOA and the regulators in the state of Washington. Because
you have a reputation now, you provided the correct information, but then you also stood by it. You took responsibility for things.
Yeah.
I want to change gears. And it's like from there, all of a sudden, what brought you to STCU? And do you feel that because of this team that you had with Sterling, for example, like you created this team and you looked out for your team, do you feel like that is a reason that STCU is so prosperous and it's like it's done so much for the community? What would you give credit to STCU breaking that and becoming as popular as it is?
Well, I think there's several building points to that. STCU is the 6th credit union founded in the state of Washington. We were chartered in 1934 by a guy named Ernie McIlvaine.
Lewis and Clark.
At Lewis and Clark High School.
That was my rival school.
And there was a guy by the name of Ed Feline who flew around the country in the early 1930s and helped a number of different credit unions charter. And, got to think about it, at the time, credit unions just had a really slow path. So it wasn't from 1934 until 1952, I think, before STCU made its $1 millionth in loans. So, 16 years before we'd loaned $1 million out. And it was not until 1960 that we looked to move out of Lewis and Clark High School, and the building, I think, the construction was finished in 1964 at the property over off of Nora. So we had a really slow kind of ramp up. We just celebrated a 35th anniversary for an employee last week. When she started, there was only 2 branches.
Wow.
We've celebrated a number of 20-year anniversaries. 20 years ago, STCU only had 6 branches. And when I started there, I think we had 16 branches 7 years ago. We are on the verge of completing the purchase of a $550 million bank in Walla Walla. When that's done, we'll have 50 branches. So in that 7-year period of time, we've about quadrupled, or we've grown 3x the number of branches. And we're looking to, we'll be at, probably about 3 times the size in assets from when I started. The difference, I'd say, is that STCU had a very well-established brand in Spokane and Kootenai County. And we built this reputation of being absolutely here to serve our members, and we would be a strong, consistent financial solutions provider. But it was just in those 2 counties, Spokane and Kootenai County. And we had a branch in Sandpoint that was fairly small, and we had a branch in Newport that was good size, but 95% of all of our members were in Spokane and Kootenai County. And so when I started there, I worked on a plan with the board to examine how we would grow the organization. And we've been really diligent in that 7-year period. And, I've had the team at STCU was very experienced together. And we've had some people that have retired, and some of those people have moved away, and some people that we've added onto the team. But I think our team has really grown together.
And you have a phenomenal team. Like everybody is they all work together, and everybody's so kind and welcoming, whether that is a branch manager or whether it's at your headquarters. And is that something that you foster within the culture that you like to pass down, or you kind of bring people up and they do that?
It's two-sided. So that absolutely is a part of the culture of STCU. And that existed before I was there. We had leaders that focused on leadership development, similar to the leadership development that I went through. But leaders that focused on leadership development. We were always doing what we called serving the heart of the member. And so that creation of a unique member experience that reinforced our brand message. We built up this whole idea of being here for good, to serve the community, to serve the members, to show up every day with a smile on your face. We just went through 2 years ago, update of our value system. And that value system is really focused on things like generosity and belonging and striving, and creating this energetic environment where our employees love to come to work every single day. They love to work with their teams. They know that their teams are going to support them. They know that the vision and values of the company are built around 4 strategic initiatives that they have, that everything that we're going to do is going to tie back to creating this experience for our members. And because they want to come to work every day and they love the team of people that they work with, they're going to pass that on. And so it existed at STCU. And then we've brought in people that are going to help us allow that to continue to grow and thrive. Shockingly, Sterling was also headquartered in Spokane. So about half of our most senior leaders came from sterling.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And are people that I've worked with for,
A long time.
in some cases 15 or 20 years. And then the other half of the people at STCU are people who've been there for 20 or 30 years.
Well, and I'm assuming a lot of people are from Spokane too.
Most of the people on our leadership team are from Spokane. Yeah. So we have, one guy that leads all of our technology development. He's worked at STCU for 31 years. The lady that's our CFO, and his name is Scott Raby. Ironically, went to high school, graduated the same class that my sister was in. They didn't know each other. The woman that's our CFO, Lindsay Myrie, has been at the credit union for 23 years. Most of the people in the finance team have been working together for 15 years. We have just a lot of established seniority on our team. Most of the technology people at STCU have worked together for 15 or 20 years. We have a woman named Patricia Kelly who was in the Air Force for 17 years, and she's been at STCU for 23 or 24 years. And, she's built an amazing team of technology professionals that have at least 15 years working together. So that balance,
the experience of all of those people, and it gets obviously filtered down into everybody else. But if I can compliment you, I had the honor of speaking to your senior leadership and all of your leaders, your managers. And it's like, not only are you a community within yourselves, but it's like you do bleed that throughout the community, whether they're members or they're customers. And it's like everybody who comes in, I think that you have hit the nail on the head of like feeling heard, seen, and valued, like Brene Brown talks about. Like when somebody walks in, everyone from the branch manager to the person behind the desk and the teller, they're hello. And it's like immediately most of them know your name too. And that is unique. And if I was going to ask you like the difference, if people didn't know the difference between a national bank and what a credit union can offer, what would you say that the absolute difference is between the two?
Well, the biggest difference is that, as a credit union, we are a not-for-profit, member-owned financial institution. So we have 285,000 members. They own the credit union. And we do have to make a profit, but our profit is used to grow the credit union. We invest in products and services. We invest in systems and technology. We invest in people. And we have to have the same capital ratio. So we have to keep 10% of, a 10% reserve on the balance sheet. Basically, that's the equity. So we need to grow the equity. So retained earnings to be able to grow the credit union. We're just a tick under 7 billion, we'll be, maybe, or tick under 6 billion, we'll be, approaching 7 billion by this time next year once we merge in Community Bank and Walla Walla. So we're right now we're around the 60th largest credit union in the country. We're the second largest in the state of Washington. But it's not really about the size of the credit union. It's about what we're doing with the resources.
Yes.
And so we are here for good. We're here to be that trusted, strong financial solution provider for our 285,000 members and the next member who walks in the door. And I talk to our teams all the time about, we can deepen we can grow sort of 5 or 6 different ways. We can grow with the relationships that we already have. How can we provide the next service or solution to the members that we have today, growing with the members that we currently have? We can grow one new member at a time. We can add infill locations and sort of grow into the geography that we're already connected to. We can grow a little bit on the fringe. We're not going to grow outside of the 200-mile radius from Spokane. We're not going to go to Seattle. We're not going to go to Portland. Our model wouldn't really work the same way there. We're driven by that connection between physical connectivity and virtual connectivity. So all of our branches have virtual lending. We have an amazing app. You can get digital cards imported. You can get a loan. You can get a credit card. All that stuff you can do through the app. We've got a contact center. We've got the branches to support people. So we have this amazing network. But we don't want to extend that virtually beyond our physical boundaries.
You know your lane, and you're sticking to it, and you're being that master within that lane.
Yeah.
So STCU is obviously growing, and you're wanting to get more into the business loans.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the difference that you were mentioning between us and the money center banks, we're here. We're here for good. We are in the Pacific Northwest. We're all over Eastern Washington. We're all over North Idaho. We're going to be in Eastern Oregon. They're all leaving. U.S. Bank has closed more than 30 branches in Eastern Washington. Wells has closed more than 20 branches. Bank of America has closed more than 40 branches. The money center banks are leaving here.
Mm-hmm.
And money center banks take your money and they take it to somewhere else and they loan it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And we have, as a credit union, all of the products and services to serve everybody in our community. We've invested in a full service line. You've seen the Frank ads. So whether it's a small business, that has very specific cash management capabilities, or, just a couple employees and, not a lot of lending needs, or somebody who needs a loan to help expand their business.
Sure.
We've got simple, straightforward underwriting for that. All the way through, some of the more complicated businesses that can exist here in our footprint, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to be the financial solution provider for Boeing,
mm-hmm.
but we can serve the businesses that are here
to help Boeing.
Yeah. In the Pacific Northwest. Yeah. And to me, that difference is who owns the organization and where's the money going.
Mm-hmm.
So for all the banks, they're owned by shareholders. The money goes into dividends. All the money's leaving here. Most of the money doesn't get reinvested back in here. It doesn't get loaned back into our community. And as a credit union, our members are the owners. The 285,000 members at STCU own the credit union.
Well, and you don't feel like a number. Like I think that the national banks, you feel like no one knows your name,
mm-hmm.
even with my unique name. No one knows my name, right?
Bank of America left over 50,000 clients stranded with PPP loans. They just didn't even make the cutoff. Small businesses that didn't get served. We originated over 2,000 PPP loans. We sourced PPP loans for 7 other credit unions that didn't have the capability. Our smallest PPP loan, I think, was like $400.
That's incredible.
Our biggest ones were millions of dollars, but we went all the way down to the smallest businesses in Spokane
and helped
them. And that's what credit unions are for. We're here.
I love that.
Here for good, here to support people in our community, here to make Spokane a better place, and not just Spokane proper, but really that greater inland Northwest region. We have 7 branches in North Idaho. We're going to have 7 branches in Eastern Oregon, and then we'll have 36 branches all around Eastern Washington, Omak, Brewster, 2 branches opening in Moses Lake, and we'll have more, down through the Tri-Cities, 15 or 16 right in Spokane County. So
well, you're doing something right, and your organization is growing, and you're making the community better in philanthropy wise. I mean, it's just like you're giving so much back, and so I look up to that, and I respect that, and I'm just excited for what you do next. If you were to look at your past self or meet your past self, what would you tell yourself or want the audience to hear today? Like, what is the one thing that you would say to overcome some of the rejections or failure that you have received?
Well, the one thing that I would say is going to sound kind of weird, but
take boxing.
Take boxing. Take boxing right off the bat. Take more risk early on, and I'm kind of risk averse, and sometimes I tend to overthink things, and I'm not saying just like willy nilly jump in, but trust in yourself to make good decisions, and trust in your skills and abilities. And I've always found that I'm not great at like buying stocks or figuring out what other companies are going to do, but I know what my company is going to do. And so I'm always willing to invest in me. And so trust in yourself, and, be willing to take more risk early on, and make those be calculated risks, and make sure that you have built the right team, and you've got the right plan, put all of your heart and soul into that. And then I think people will be successful.
Well, I love that. And invest in yourself. And I know that you have invested in this company and you invest in yourself. And so thank you very, very much for being a part of this today and coming on and sharing your story. And if there's, where can people find out more about you or STCU?
Yeah. So I'm pretty easy to find. I am in Liberty Lake almost every single day. And, my email and phone number at STCU are accessible through our website. I'm on LinkedIn. Those are probably the two most consistent channels. I respond to every email that comes into me. My executive admin, McKay Landon, and I kind of make sure that everybody that finds me, we respond to.
You're very approachable.
Yep.
Yeah.
I answer every phone call that comes in. My team is just joking. They're like, we wish you'd answered your phone less. I don't get all that many phone calls at my desk, but a lot of people do call me on my cell phone. I am the current chair of the Spokane Airport Board. And so, I try to be front and center in the community. But through LinkedIn or through the STCU webpage, probably the easiest ways to track me down.
And is the goal of being on the board of the airport, is that just to continue to grow and bring more value and community and experiences to Spokane? Like, do you see Spokane growing?
Absolutely. It's certainly not the pay, because it's a it is a free
as a board being on the board of other things. I agree.
It is an unpaid community board membership. I found the Spokane Airport Board to just be one of the very best learning opportunities. The team there is so professional. They've taught me a lot about running board meetings. Everything is public. They taught me about the importance of the committee structure, supporting the regular board activities. And I feel really privileged because I had the ability to work with Larry Crowder as the CEO, and Larry has massively increased the professionalism and the coverage of the airport. The airport is doubled in size. If you haven't seen it, we're 20% of the way through an $800 million renovation project. Pretty soon there will be 6 more gates in the C terminal that look like the 3 newest gates.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. Yeah. And it's so easy to get in and out of there versus SeaTac. Yeah, you guys are doing a great job.
SeaTac, I think, has to be one of the worst airports, and they're in a construction project, so hopefully it'll become better over time. But the accessibility at Spokane, the organization of the team, and we absolutely want to continue to grow. There will be, where the sea baggage claim is right now, that'll be a new central entryway. And then what exists already in the 3 new gates, that will extend across through where the AB terminal is. So eventually there will be 30 or 36 gates that all look like the 3 new gates.
But is Starbucks coming back is my question.
Starbucks.
Or they're over on the other side, aren't they?
Starbucks is not going to come back for a while because of how the vendors are set up.
Gotcha.
So Pete's Coffee.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. I like that plug. Well, seriously, thank you. You're going great places, and I know that you're doing great things within our community, and I wish you the best, and I hope that you keep doing it. And I look forward to seeing you again, because this is a relationship that I love, and I appreciate you and your time very, very much.
Thanks, Blue.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one. All right. We'll see ya.
Thank you so much for listening to Navigating No. If this episode brings you value, or you know someone who could benefit from it, the best way to support the show is by sharing and subscribing. It's completely free and helps us reach more people. And if you have any questions, feedback, or guests you'd like me to interview, drop a comment while you're there. I'd love to hear from you. And most importantly, thank you for tuning in. And let's continue sharing optimism and positivity.